So, what's stopping you from embodying healthy masculinity, right? I'm David Chambers. I'm a men's dating, relationship, intimacy coach. And I spend a lot of time with men going over the aspects of masculinity and how there's a huge intersection between how we view ourselves as men, which is, in essence, our masculinity, and what we should be like as men, and relationships and dating and intimacy and how we show up in those areas, right? And it'll start to make a bit more sense in a minute. So, what's stopping you? Important announcement before we get into this. Right? I want you to listen to this episode and the information I'm going to give you, not from the standpoint of like, I don't do that. Yeah. Instead of looking for like being defensive, it's like defensive listening. Yeah. You're trying to prove me wrong or whatever, right? If you're a man listening to this, is to actually ask the question of like, where am I showing up like this? Because that is actually what's going to get you further in life. That's what's going to get you further along the continuum, right? From where you are to where you want to be. If you're defensive, you're only gonna look at where you are doing the things right, and you're gonna ignore the things where you could be there's some work to do or some growth, right? So really remember that. And this isn't binary. A lot of these things are like on a continuum. Yeah. So the first point I see really getting in the way of men embodying healthy masculinity is shallowness. So the opposite of shallowness is depth. So they're not cultivating depth in their relationships, and be that their friendships or be that their work relationships or be that their romantic relationships, right? Often there's this fear of committing to things, because when we commit to things, we have to go deeper into them. So that might be work, that might be a relationship. We keep conversations shallow. We keep the experiences shallow. Like, spend all your time with your mates talking in banter, talking about work and talking about technology and talking about what's really going on for people, the struggles you're having, the dreams you have, the areas where you don't know why you're struggling or where you want to get to, but you hide all those things. You keep them shallow, often because of a fear of being judged or fear of seen as not man enough or not being good enough as a man, right? A lot of things come down to this fear of being seen as not being good enough as a man. So the second piece I'm going to touch on is about communicating or not communicating. This goes hand in hand with shallowness, right? This fear of judgment, this fear of saying the wrong thing or not saying the thing in the right way leads to this shallowness, not expressing ourselves. Like I said, this fear of judgment is probably one of the biggest fears that men have constantly, and it's big and small, and it comes up in all these little moments where you might be in front of a friend and he says, "How are you?" And you're thinking, "God, I've been fucking terrible recently. I feel really shit." And you go, "Yeah, I'm good, man." And you don't even know there was a choice. You just reacted. You just say what comes to mind. It's only hours later you realize that you didn't tell the truth. Yeah. Or you're dating or you're in relationship, and maybe your partner or the person you're dating, you don't really express to yourselves. You don't really kind of say what's really who you really are, right? You're afraid they're going to judge you for your hobbies or the things you do or don't do, or for your perspective and opinions on politics and the world, or maybe you have no opinions on politics in the world, right? We're back into the shallowness. You're not diving into those sorts of things. You see them as maybe I'm not political or something like that. But when we don't communicate, we don't give people the opportunity to know us, right? And if we can't really communicate, often we struggle with questions. So we don't really give people the opportunity for us to know them either, right? And you don't create a space for like a level of safety with people, compassion, clarity, safety that could be created inside of romantic relationships and friendships. So you end up with these shallow relationships where you're not communicating. Third on my list here is what gets in the way of embodying healthy masculinity is a lack of self-awareness. Did you know that 85% of people, I think over 85% of people, think they're more self-aware than they are? On studies that have been done, people always think they're more self-aware than they are. They often will give themselves like a 7 or 8 out of 10 for self-awareness, irrespective of where they are. People around self-awareness is often this like, I know myself, right? And I'm not saying that about me. I don't know myself. I don't claim to know myself. It's not a claim I ever make. I am endeavoring to know myself better, but there are many layers of myself and the little reasons that I do things that I am not fully aware of. And that's fine for me. I'm in that adventure. I'm in that pursuit. But I meet a lot of people who are like, I know myself. I know who I am. I know why I do things. Bollocks. You do not. There are layers of unconscious programming and conditioning from society, from your family, from your parents, from your grandparents, generational stuff that you have got no understanding of awareness of how it controls your life. If you're in patterns that you're unhappy about, relationship patterns, dating patterns, intimacy, all these things, and you think you know why, and you haven't solved it, that means you don't really know why, right? So often we think we're more self-aware than we are, and that gets in the way of us being these healthy masculine people, because often we think we know what healthy masculinity is or why we're not doing it. Like vulnerability, I'm not really a vulnerable person, that's just not who I am. That's not true. You know, you see little children who are 4, 5, 6 years old, they're not vulnerable. They are. You've learned that for some reason you shouldn't do that. That's why you're not. That's nothing to do with who you really are. That's a learning. That's like patterns that come on top of you. So self-awareness is being able to go, oh yeah, actually the reason why I'm not very vulnerable sometimes is because my dad would punish me if I said I was upset or I cried. Great. Then we can get in to do something about it. But the lack of self-awareness can get in the way of that. And the same with dating, right? If you're struggling in dating and you are blaming someone else, like, oh, it's the women, it's dating us, whatever, that's a lack of self-awareness, because you're outsourcing the responsibility of your life onto something else that you can't control. Yeah. And you're not taking agency in your own life. That's probably why your dating life isn't going well, because you're not taking agency in your own life. You're outsourcing. And I see this a lot with men and women these days. Everyone's blaming everyone else, when really there's a lot of responsibility on the way that you communicate, or you show up on dates, or you don't take risks, or you internalize rejection and failure. Next point, lack of mission or purpose. A lot of men, their pursuit is just to survive or chase money. Yeah. And they mistake that for purpose. And we have to dive into something a bit deeper than that. Like, to uncover what we're passionate about, what's meaningful to us, what we are willing to stand up in front of 100 people and talk about, because it makes our heart sing. It makes us something really meaningful to us. And if you were like, oh, I don't have anything that's that important to me, you just haven't found anything, right? And maybe like really going after something would lead you to be of service to other people, instead of just service to money, your job, your boss, or whatever, or just hedonism, right? And that when we're stuck in this kind of like no purpose, no meaning, it can actually lead to us treating other people quite badly, because we lack meaning and purpose. We lack drive, we lack focus, right? It's all these things I see people, or we become quite selfish or self-centered or driven by our fears, right? Because we're not serving something higher or bigger than ourselves. Another way in which we really lack in embodying healthy masculinity is when you're lacking in relationships, right? You're lacking in meaningful, platonic, meaningful, romantic relationships in your life. Because a huge part of how we see ourselves as men comes through in a way that we relate. A huge way. Do we communicate? Do we open up about what we're feeling? Do we express our desires? Do we express our dreams? Do we stand up for our boundaries? You know, all these things come under the umbrella of healthy masculinity, right? And if you're not doing those things, then you're going to really struggle in relationships. The next piece is about emotional reactivity. And this is something that a lot of men really struggle with, right? Even if you are one of these kind of quote unquote stoic guys, right, who doesn't show emotion and blah, 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 you're shutting down when things don't go well. You stop talking, you don't express yourself. That's emotional reactivity. Maybe you become frustrated and you shut down and don't talk, right? Or maybe you experience some shame and that causes you to get angry or frustrated or want to leave. Or, you know, you feel rejection. Like, there's all these levels of emotional reactivity that don't look like emotional reactivity that we imagine, because it's not like breaking down in tears or screaming and shouting in the street or anything like that. When it's still emotional reactivity, it's just internalized. The outward expression of it is internalized and leads you to disconnect often, right? So you have to really realize that emotional reactivity, your emotions shouldn't be running your life. I say that again, your emotions shouldn't be running your life. So if your has a fear of rejection, and that means that you're not really dating, that's allowing your emotions to run your life. If you have a fear of rejection, you're in a relationship, and that means you don't talk to your partner about how you're feeling or what you desire, or, you know, how you want to change the intimacy, you're allowing your emotions to run your life. Yeah, because fear is also an emotion, right? Or the assumption that something's going to go wrong. You're allowing it to run your life instead of having this direction of like, what is it I really want? What's really meaningful for me? And being willing to face the difficult emotions and lean into those, right? That's emotional resilience. Yeah. And this is something we often lack, and it means that we do terrible things. cheating, cheating is emotional reactivity, right? Lying is emotional reactivity, right? Because you might need to tell the truth about something that might lead to a difficult conversation. So instead of having that difficult conversation, you lie so you can have an easier ride. Emotional reactivity, right? If you don't do the work to become emotionally resilient, you're going to struggle because you're going to lie, you're going to cheat, you're going to avoid. Yeah, you're going to shut down. You're not going to have difficult conversations. You're going to avoid eye contact. Even avoiding eye contact is a form of emotional reactivity, right? So it's like learning how much of this is running your life. So the next point here, number 8, is about this kind of alpha male culture or man box culture. And I've talked a lot about this in podcast episodes before. Man box culture really is around this idea of this kind of dominant, I think it's hermetic, masculinity, which is about dominance, power, and control. Yeah. So it's like suppressing the emotion, avoid being feminine or girly in any way, be straight, not gay, demonstrate power at all times, like always appear to be know what you're doing, never ask for any help, view women as conquest or property, right? These are the kind of standard things that we see in what we might call traditional, you might call toxic, I call man box culture, or the culture of the masculinity we have in our world, right? This is the outdated paradigm that keeps men lonely, in mental health issues around depression and anxiety and so forth, and in fear and struggling inside of relationships. And this is probably one of the biggest blockers that touches all the others, that gets in the way of embodying healthy masculinity, because this masculinity, the man box culture masculinity, this very old alpha male masculinity, is a very narrow band of what you can be, which means you can't really be who you want to be. You can't embody authenticity because you're trapped by these lines and these rules and these walls of this kind of man box culture, of this alpha male culture that you need to adhere to be seen as a respectable or an acceptable man. Yeah, because when you're inside of this, and we are all inside it to some degree, right? But when you don't really face that, oh, actually, these are invisible walls I don't need to adhere to, you're trapped. You're trapped. You're gonna say ridiculous shit to people. You're like, that's not man enough. He's being a pussy, whatever it is, right? Or you start going into the real edges of this kind of way of being, and you kind of adhering. Listening to Andrew Tate and a lot of the things that he says about how a man has to be. It's a very narrow band, right? And it's full of shame. It's full of guilt, and it's full of suppression, because when you're adhering to it, you have to suppress who you are as a person to adhere to this thing. Right? Because we all have emotions. Yeah. We all have a feminine. If you've listened to enough of my episode, I talk a lot about masculine feminine dynamics. We all have a feminine that we must, be with, like we have to suppress so much that we become someone else. And that leads to these exiling of the parts of ourselves, which leads to depression, unhappiness, and loneliness, and not being able to really be with the people in our lives. Number 9 touches on this. This is related to the man box piece, because this is a fear and anger and oppression of the feminine and women, which is an aspect of the man box culture, is like wanting to push away anything or ridicule or see the feminine or women as lesser than. Yeah, women's jobs, that's a job a man can't do. That's women's stuff. That's, all those different ways. Like, it's one thing to say, like, there's women's clothes which are designated for women. And, not so, we live in a more gender fluid world now, right? But there's another thing to look at a job and be like, being a nurse is a woman's job. Yeah. Or being a teacher is a woman's job, or whatever it may be, is something that women do that men don't do. And there's nothing other than this kind of old, archaic ideas about it, right? Or maybe even how you should be at home. Like, women do domestic responsibilities. Men shouldn't do hoovering and cleaning. It's saying that thing is beneath me. And it's beneath me because it's for women. Yeah? So let's be really mindful of that, because that's sometimes something we're unaware of that we're doing. Another important part here, I think, for men is being around not embodying healthy masculinity is not embodying leadership, like attuned leadership, this disconnected from the ability to lead and inspirational leadership. The leadership might come in the form of control and force, which is what we often see. But I'm talking about leadership that's guided by heart, that's guided by clarity and presence, care and connection to those that you're leading. You know, when I talk about leading a relationship, I'm not talking about by force or control. I'm by leading a relationship based on, you know, the values you and your partner have and where you want the relationship to go, and then charting a course for that, you know, based on your own clarity, your own understanding of each other. Like, it might be that a simple example is leading a relationship can be such a wide topic, such as it can be small things, but it's like your partner comes home and you know that she's really in need of relaxation. In that moment, to lead a relationship might be like, hey, babe, I know you're really tired. I'm just going to cook some dinner. I'm going to put our feet up and I'm going to give you a massage. You're leading your partner into, you know, a beautiful state of being. Leading a relationship might be being like, hey, we need to stop spending so much money and we need to start saving money for having a child or buying a house. Leading a relationship because it's in service of the relationship and its higher goals. Yeah. And you have the clarity and presence and also the willingness to lead as well. And the last piece, the last thing around why men struggle to embody healthy masculinity is around this lack of integrity. And I talked about this before: lying, cheating, being out of alignment with their goals and values. And out of lack of integrity also is like, what's your integrity like with yourself, with the things that you say you're gonna do and the way you're gonna be? Like, are you in integrity with that, with yourself? And that's a really important thing. I was thinking about this on the weekend. Are you in integrity with your dreams and your goals? Like, on the big scale of your goals of what you want for your life and all the year, but like on the day to day, how in integrity are you with the things you plan to do each day? You know, do you get sidetracked and distracted? Do you just scroll on your phone all the time instead of, you know, doing the important work you need to do? You know, and this is an important part of kind of healthy masculinity, which is integrity with self and others as well. So glad you've enjoyed this episode. If you got this far, you've enjoyed it. All this to say for me is, obviously, you know, relationships and dating in an area that I work with people a lot. There's going to be some free giveaways coming out soon, as well as some products around dating. So stay tuned for those. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or if you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave a review and a subscribe as well. Helps me get out to more people and shift the world, which is one of my aims and missions. Ciao, ciao.